My name is Marissa, and I will be narrating this presentation on feudalism. This presentation was put together by my group, which includes Sarah, Caitlin, Elmira, Scott, Shateya, and me. So let's start off with the question, what is feudalism? Feudalism is tricky to define because there are so many different variations that occurred across different countries and timelines. Although there's not one formal definition for feudalism, a key point is that it developed as a political and social system because of the need for economic stability after the fall of the Roman Empire. Another factor that led to this system of feudalism is the plague. Because of the plague, the population began to decline, and so a lot of farmers began to rise up. In some Eastern European countries, such as Poland and Germany, farmland had been abandoned, and so the demand for grain decreased, so farmers were able to expand their livestock and land holdings. Some of these new large landholders didn't have enough workers to tend to all this new land, so they forced peasants into servitude. And these workers became what we now call serfs. Serfs are different than the term vassals because serfs were kind of forced into the servitude, whereas vassals usually got something in return and had more freedoms. And we'll talk about those later. In contrast to some of those Eastern European countries mentioned previously, like Poland and Germany, a lot of Western Europe was being invaded by Vikings and the Magyars, which led to this demand or need for protection. So a lot of lords in this area began to build castles, which protected the people inside their walls. And so this system of feudalism began to rise up to keep villages and families safe, since there was really no central government to do this. To be able to protect the people inside their territories, lords needed the help of warriors. These warriors were generally known as knights. One quote from the textbook says they had a violent prosecution of their lord's interests. So they were very loyal. And though some offered their knightship in return for land, some knights already held land freely and they owed no service. They just felt the need to protect their land. And so knights are one example of a relationship between lords and vassals, with the knight offering loyalty in return for land and protection to a lord. So let's dive in more to this idea of lords and vassals, because it's really one of the main characteristics of feudalism. So generally, there's some kind of relationship between two parties. In this case, we'll describe that relationship between the lord and vassal. So generally, a lord has some land, which he may have gotten from a king, and this land is called a fief. A fief is defined as a gift or grant that creates some kind of contractual relationship between the giver and the receiver. So in the system, the lords would offer up land and protection to vassals, and in return, the lord would get money through taxes. They would get services and also loyalty. Fiefs could also be revenues from tolls and annual sums of money, so not just land here. There was generally a dynamic where the lord could protect and elevate his vassal, but he also kind of had the power to discipline him or bring him down as well. As mentioned previously, lords mainly got pieces of land from kings. While this is the case, kings were more of a figurehead. and the lords ran their own mini-estates. Another characteristic of feudalism is that it was an agrarian economy. This meant that their economy focused a lot on producing and exchanging crops, in addition to cultivating the land. Less money was exchanged throughout, and another concept is manorialism. Here, there's a relationship between usually like a leisured class that depends on the agricultural practices carried on by like others in the manor. One example of this could be a knight that lives in a castle that has like peasants to support their agricultural life. So really, like, the knights wouldn't be doing anything to cultivate the land, and they would rely a lot on the peasants in this scenario. There have been some changes in the feudalism system over time. One change is a weakening of the master's position and transferring of power to a smaller master. Basically, there was distribution of power throughout. Also, once agriculture became commercialized, the mode of production changed. And when more cities began to emerge, the feudalism system could no longer hold up, and so new structures and systems began to emerge. Feudalism made its way to many different parts of the world. Some places previously mentioned included Western and Eastern Europe. So Europe really was a main place that feudalism took place. There are some other places where concepts of feudalism occurred. These places include the Ottoman Empire, China, and even Japan. And even though we say we can use the term feudalism for a lot of these places, there are arguments as to, like, does feudalism actually fit this system that they were using? For example, in Japan, and there have been disagreements about whether or not to use that term. But even so, there were lots of differences between the different systems. For example, a lot of the Japanese feudal lords were often a lot more powerful than the royals that they were said to be subordinate to. So there were definitely a lot of differences across the different countries, which is another reason why feudalism is really tricky to define. So even though there are so many definitions of feudalism, we can say here that it's a political and social system that developed because of the need of economic stability. Also, there was a lot of distribution of power, no matter which definition you looked at. So no one person completely held all the power. So please enjoy this comic, and thank you for listening.